Welcome back to the Course Creation Incubator Podcast. I'm Gina Anativia, your host, your cheerleader, your bulldog, all rolled into one to help you get your course and marketing done. I talk all of the time about the value of coaches and mentors inside of this podcast, and I wouldn't have the incredible business I have today if it wasn't for the mentors that took me under their wing and taught me the digital strategy ropes. And one of the biggest and greatest mentors and coaches I've had is a powerhouse named Victoria Gibson. All right, so let me take you back. This was years and years ago, and Amy Porterfield is a dear friend, and I kept picking her brain for advice. Poor Amy. And I finally said to her, "This is crazy for me to always be bugging you. Who do you know that might be a really great coach for me?" And she had been part of Marie Forleo's mastermind. I know, I'm dropping all the names today. And she introduced me to Vic, who had this mastermind at the time full of fierce business women. So I ended up working with Vic for 2 years to get my business really off the ground and to go from offering all kinds of consulting to focusing on online courses. Thanks to Vic, Course Creation Boutique was born. And along the way, she taught me how to sell, how to take the fear out of it, to get comfortable with it, so it's become second nature for me. And I wanted to bring her on to talk about that selling aspect. And you're going to hear her joke around about framing me as a selling coach and how funny that is for her, because she's really a marketing genius. And today she's focused on life coaching. This is what she says on our website. "My superpower is helping women get heard by sharing their true message so they can create the life they actually want, one with choice, freedom, and love." And she helped me with that. I love that. That is very, very true. She is a copywriting genius as well. So she's going to help us out with our messaging, how we can really add value, and how to sell like a boss. All right, let's get to it. Vic, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you on.
I am thrilled to be here.
I want to talk to you. I was talking about in the intro how for me, you are the sales coach. You are the sales queen. You have taught me so much about selling. And first and foremost, I just want to talk about a little bit, why do you think we're so afraid of selling, of putting ourselves out there as course creators and asking for money?
Well, I think it's just that universal need for approval, right? We're all afraid of getting rejected. And it's interesting that you even see me as a sales coach, because if I thought about what I think about, sales, it'd be like, your heart starts to drop a little bit when you think about being sold to. So in order to get over that, I really come from a place of how can I create more value? How can I offer up my value so that does a lot of the selling for me? And by that, I mean, how can I come to an audience or a person who has a really big problem and offer them a great solution, a can't say no solution that makes the next step of working together so much easier? So I like to kind of do the selling before the selling so I don't have to sell. Does that make sense?
No, that makes sense. And I'm probably going to say this a million times during this podcast. One of the amazing things you taught me is we've worked on sales pages together, and you pulling out those benefit bullets and really talking through the value, what you were just talking about. And I think doing that exercise first made it that much easier to speak to the value of what I have to offer.
Absolutely. And it should be woven into every piece of communication. But what I find when people are creating courses, as you know, I have been in the online marketing world for, about 11 years now. And I think I created my first course 10 years ago. And it actually was quite a good course and it did sell, but of course I told myself that it didn't sell enough and that I had to go and do something else, and I went on to some other shiny object. Whereas imagine if I still had that course now, it'd be fantastic. But anyway, we all do these things because the art of creating the course, it puts us in that that frame of mind of like, oh, it's exciting. You're learning things. I mean, yes, it's work, and yes, it's all new, and you've got to develop a new skill set. But as you're doing that, there's not really any risk, right? Like, you might have invested in resources and you're putting your time in, but it's kind of the fun part, right? Like where you get to go, oh, all this stuff I know, how am I going to put it together to really change people's lives and make a difference? So when you're in that phase, it kind of just feels really exciting and inspiring to you. Then when you have to step out and see if anyone's going to buy it, like this is your work. It's hard not to take it personally. This is your course. This is your expertise. So of course it brings up all those fears that, like, we're human. We have a brain that likes to keep us safe. It doesn't want us to go and take a course out there to the world and see if anyone will invest in it. So that's where the fear comes from. And you can set yourself up beautifully and still be a little bit nervous about that. And that's normal. So I think the main thing is knowing, sure, that is normal. And you're always going to feel a little bit of like, hesitation or wariness about going into that territory until you do it more and more times, where it just becomes more about connection. I firmly believe that when you can firstly articulate a person's problem better than they talk to themselves about it or have it, playing on auto loop in their head, and you can offer them an amazing solution and share that clearly, then people will be drawn to you already. They'll already be, one step closer to you, and they just need maybe a confirmation point or a little bit of urgency to push them along. It doesn't have to be fake urgency. It just means that, there are things that do help people get to a yes, because people naturally want to avoid risk as well on the other side. So then they're not always willing to jump in quickly. So we need to lay those foundations early on. And that's why I love marketing, because marketing does that. And the selling just becomes an event, eventuality. Like it has to happen.
It's a natural part of the process.
Piece, right? Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And you've built up to it. And I know you always taught us that, and that's what we've talked about with the content run up, right? Or the different pieces you're putting out ahead of when you're about to open carts or when you're about to offer that course for the first time, and just building that up, like, just like you said, and building it to an event where they're ready. You've conditioned them. You've gotten them to that point, right?
Yes, because you're giving them those results in advance by sharing some value for free first, so that they get a chance to know who you are. You get to establish a bit of that credibility and authority, whether it be in a webinar or which I love webinars, but they can be a bit intimidating for people straight out of the gate. But even if you were just going to get on and do a video, or do a YouTube video, or do a Facebook Live, or get on Instagram with a quick reel or something, what you want to be doing is opening the door to who you are, what you care about, and what problem you're solving, so that they can opt in first, like not opt in just putting their email in, but like raise their hand and say, oh, I want to know more. I want to hear more about this. You're talking my language. I'm interested. And then you give them a few insights or some takeaways that keep moving them along. It's like, great, they're pre-qualifying themselves to you. So no fancy sales pitches are required. Yeah. Is what I like to think. Yeah.
Okay, I love this, and I know you work with a lot of coaches and consultants, and as do I, who are building out their courses for the first time. And inevitably, I get the question, "Well, Gina, I don't have that course proof of concept yet, right? Or I don't have those case studies." And what do you say to that? I always say, use your one-on-one knowledge, but how can they kind of spin that, Vic, into a benefit for them?
Yeah, and look, that is hard, because look, we know that testimonials and social proof, real life examples, case studies are amazing at getting people to say yes and trust you and jump in. But often when you've created a course from your expertise, you have a lot of that there in your own experience. So don't be afraid to share your own experience, even if it is, a personal experience or some insight that you gained. I know I was listening the other day to Russell Brunson, a marketer, and he said that just sharing information is not as powerful as telling people how you learned or earned it, he said, which I thought this was very cool, because I think I have a tendency to do this too. Like, I've absorbed it and, gone through and had the experience, and I just want to say, don't worry, I'll shortcut it all. Here's what you have to do. But until you get people's buy-in, they're not as motivated to move. So you can evoke just as much power of a test just as much power as a testimonial in the stories of how you've learned or earned your expertise, right? And maybe where it's failed, maybe where it's succeeded. That sort of pre-frame is just as powerful as, hey, I went and showed someone how to make $1 million with this, or I went and stopped someone overeating forever, or whatever it is. When you talk about either your journey or how you learned what you're going to share, I think we're used to engaging with stories and experiences. So if you can do that, then they'll still be drawn to you, and that trust will absolutely grow.
Okay, I love this. And I had to get more accustomed to this. And it's actually because of this podcast. I was kind of reluctant to talk about my failures. And you, of all people, know, and we were talking before this podcast, that you're going to have failures as a course creator, as a business owner. Like every one makes you stronger and that much smarter, right? And a better business owner. And you always taught me that. But I was always reluctant to talk about those failures till now. Till the last year and a half or so, and I see what students, listeners can get out of it. But it was scary at first, right? It was one thing to talk about my students or clients, and it's another thing to talk about myself and where I messed up.
Totally. And, I've worked with clients for many years now and helping them grow their business and up-level their marketing. And so I do have testimonials now, but where it can trip me up is that I'll just sort of throw all these testimonials down in a webinar even. And it's like, well, hang on, how is that linked to where my potential clients are right now, where they could be sure they could see that could happen for them, but how do they then link that to the framework or the path that I'm offering them on a webinar? So I've then had to step back and go, oh, hang on a minute, I've got to pull back, right? Because also that leads me to another point, that a confused mind always says no. As we know, I didn't come up with that principle. That is just one of the principles, right, of life or marketing. Yes. A confused mind always says no.
Yes.
And when we're trying to get approval or be impressive or step into a new space, particularly the expert space, we want to be the expert, right? Like we want to show everyone how much we know and how great we are at it. It's just natural because we're just trying to avoid that rejection. But in doing so, you can overcomplicate your message. And so it doesn't mean that you're not connecting with people who need what you have, but when you overcomplicate it, and this is coming from someone, I'm raising my hand firmly in the air here, I overcomplicate things so often, and it's a conversion killer. People will say no because they're either overwhelmed or confused, or they're embarrassed to ask for more clarity, right? So that's a really important point too. And it can happen in your course creation as well. Like you just go straight in and you want to teach everything, or you put too much in, this is your area, Gina. So you definitely, I'm sure, are sharing with them the best way to share their knowledge, but it's also important in your marketing and your conversations that you might have. Like I'm a firm believer in, if you haven't got all the marketing pieces set up as you're learning the art of direct response marketing and online marketing that converts, and long form sales pages and webinar slide decks and all of that stuff. It's a lot to learn, but there is a way to just start having connected conversations one by one when you don't have a big audience, but you have a course to sell. So in that, you really want to be connecting with where they are and diagnosing their problem, right? Like as they see it and how it's showing up for them, so that they can come to the place where it is, their own realization of what it's costing not to have it solved. So much so that they will then ask you, well, how can I work with you? So you never actually even really have to sell.
Yeah, which is great, which is the end game, right? And I love this idea that because I'm reframing myself all the time, that where are my people right now, right? Because the last thing, and I've heard this before, is, well, I'm not there. That's not me, right? And that's the last thing I want to hear when I'm teaching a master class or I'm talking to a group, right? Like, that's beyond me. Like, if I talk about people who are working full time in online marketing, right? And building their courses, like, that's not where my people are right now. And I need to keep that in mind. That's something that you always talk about, right? Where are your people right now? And just reset your mind of where they are.
Yes, because we've had the advantage of the experience and the knowledge to know how to get the result. And we have a level of ownership over that result or confidence that we know how to get there. But the beautiful clients that you're calling in aren't there yet. They can't see
Right.
that. Even if you just tell them, they can't, they've got to be able to believe that they can do it or that it's possible for them. And so just going straight into sort of theory or telling them is where there can be a bit of a disconnect. We have to definitely come to explaining very much like in marketing, not in a connection call or a discovery call or an enrollment conversation or whatever you want to call it. Not then. You don't want to be explaining anything about what you do until after you first diagnose where they're at. And in your marketing, you want to only be talking about where they're at to start with, so that they can say, oh, I see myself. Oh, you get me. Oh, I trust you now. Okay, now you can kind of open the door to a new possibility. But we don't start with that possibility, which is a bit like traditional sales that you think of, which gives you the ick factor, right? Like you go to buy a car at the car yard and the guy comes up, hey, what are you looking for today? Oh, have you seen this new model? It's great. And it's got, turbo and beautiful paint and all this. And you're kind of like, oh, hang on, I'm not there yet. Like, and as soon as he starts opening with all the great things, you immediately close off, right? You're like, oh, he's trying to sell me something. I don't want that, right? So that's the last thing you want to be doing by telling people how great your course is, or you've got this new technique and it's amazing. You launch straight into that. It's like used car sales speak and people will close off. Whereas if you show that you can understand where they are and maybe even tell a story about when you were there too and what you needed to shift, or the knowledge that came to you when you noticed a problem with other people, if it's not your own personal problem, then that will soften, it softens the way that you're sharing the advantages of what you have.
Love that. Yes, absolutely. This is great insight, Vic. I also, you were the one who taught me how to do sales calls, how to do a one-on-one session, and we never call them sales calls, whatever, enrollment calls. I know you've got a million names for them. What are, just offhand, a couple of tips, because there are probably folks listening right now saying, I'm not doing sales calls. There's no freaking way. I'm doing what I want. There's no way I'm going to sell that way. And I thought that way too, until you taught me that they don't have to be completely terrifying.
No, and they don't. And look, even if you're a bit allergic to people, I used to say that, or I still say this, that they're a great way to get market research, right? So
totally.
when I was a marketing manager in corporate, we used to pay $8,000 per what was called a focus group. And that was where the market research company would bring in like 5 people and ask some questions about something we were thinking of doing at the shopping mall. I used to manage a shopping mall and do marketing programs there and stuff like that. Anyway, they'd say, oh, what about if there was a cinema? Would you like a cinema here? Or, they'd ask all these things. Anyway, we'd have to pay $8,000 to get their insights, or like what our market thought of what things that we might be going to do or what we were doing at the time, right?
Yeah.
So I always had a value on getting that kind of feedback. And sure, we can get a little bit of it through social media. Maybe you can send an email poll if you have a big enough list to ask some things. But really, there's no better way than talking one-on-one with someone who has the problem that you want to solve. And being disconnected to whether they're going to buy or not. That's a really big piece. You've got to like let go of that attachment to an outcome. The outcome is just the call itself and that connection, where you can get insight into your market or your audiences or your target client's problem, and it will help shape your marketing and how you share what you do. So that's always going to be a win anyway. Whereas I think people want to go, oh, well, that's a lot of my time, or that they've got no money. People just want to pick my brain. But when you set your marketing up right from the very beginning, they will understand and still value that opportunity to ask questions about your course. If you do a webinar or a video, you give a bit of value up front, or maybe you've got a little freebie that you're using as a list builder, they will get an idea of what you can help them with by you giving them that value in advance. Sure, some people just want to get on the call and like, great, coach me, give me all the answers and I'll go off and do it and I won't pay you anything. But when you frame it right, that you're diagnosing the problem, you're asking the questions, they're not asking you until the very end, it won't fall into that territory.
No,
so you just get to write down like little statements they say. Maybe you could use that in your marketing, like the things that people present to you, you won't have thought of yet, or it'll just give you a much better idea of how to get more connected with your client, whether they buy or not. So we're definitely not doing some kind of sales routine of like, sure, you could ninja them up with, mind games and NLP. And then you'll get a client who feels like, oh, I don't know how, like suddenly, like when you go to the shopping mall and there's those people with the hand cream or whatever, like, I see people fall for them time and time again. And I'm like, how do you fall for that? It's so, NLP sales pitch, like 101, right? Like, whereas 101, this way we just want to be really curious about what's going on for them, but ask them a series of kind of questions that helps them understand where they are in life, and more specifically where they are in relation to what you're going to help them shift, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's helping people lose weight, grow their confidence, have a better business, whatever it is, right? It helps them understand the cost of staying where they are once they can answer questions about what they want, where they want to go, and you can illuminate the gap between where they are and where they want to go. And you can also ascertain how serious they are about getting there. Like, I think sometimes I'm serious about losing weight, but I don't go and diet, right? So if I had a discovery call with a weight loss coach, my commitment levels really probably aren't where they need to be a really great client, right? So you want to make sure you're getting the best people possible to come and join you. But I know some of your clients too will be like, but I just got an online course so I can just scale this up and not have to talk one-on-one. And that's fine too. You can still put these elements into a webinar, for example, that leads to a sale on the webinar, where you still want to be sharing with them points that help them understand what's not working and where they want to go and the cost of staying where they are. So you can still apply that principle in a webinar to a sale as well.
Absolutely. And I just love what you're saying about shifting your mindset around these calls. And I get my best stories from these calls, and inevitably they do not become clients or students, but I get some incredible tales to tell. So always worth it.
And they may recommend you to somebody else, sure. Or they still could walk. They just might not be ready right now, but maybe they're ready in a year or two. I've had plenty of people that comes back where they're really grateful that you showed up in that way and you were curious about them and they got some insight, and whether or not they're ready to buy, you still feel good as a coach or as an expert or whoever you are in terms of sharing your information. You're called to create an online course. Well, I hope you are, because you want to change people's lives with what you know. So this is just an extension of that. Sure, It takes some of your time, but once you get things rolling, you probably won't have to do them, and that's totally fine. But the man that I learned sales calls from, Kevin Nations, or discovery calls, whatever you want to call them, high ticket selling, I guess, he still does that now. He says it's so funny, that all the marketing out there is how to, make a lot of money without ever talking to anybody. But the power is in the connection.
Yes.
And it can actually be way more fulfilling. You can get so much more understanding for your clients and help change their lives in a much better way by having some of that connection. And he still does calls because he'd be selling, like $20,000-$30,000 a call. So, hey, what, you want to put an hour and a half out of your time for that? Sure. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why not?
Vic, this has been so fun. I know you got to go, and Alex is making some dinner. Tell us how we can learn more from you. Where can we check out your website or your content? Tell us.
Yeah. So I basically help life coaches, so personal development experts, coaches who help people create, great outcomes in personal life, whether it be health, wealth, spirituality, whatever that may be. So they can find me at victoriagibson.com, or even on Instagram is probably where I share most of my posts and things. So that's at I am Victoria Gibson, only because Victoria Gibson was taken, but that's my handle too. So come and say hi on Instagram. I always post videos and invitations and just random musings there. So come along and DM me if you want to find out anything more.
Perfect. Thank you, Vic. This was so fun. You have to come back and talk some more, because we could have talked about so many different topics. So I
totally
love chatting you up.
Add me in. Schedule me in.
I'm scheduling you in.
Schedule me in. I'm always up for it, honey. It's a way to talk to you. I'm happy.
Okay, love you lots.
Me too. See ya.
Okay, she's incredible, right? I think if we can listen to what she's saying about selling and adding value, that question, how can I create more value? Then I think a lot of the selling fear really melts away. Please check out more about Vic at victoriagibson.com. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss one Course Creation and Marketing episode. And I would be honored if you would leave me a review as well if you're getting anything out of this podcast. Until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.